agreed, but that's what he said.
Yeah, I would respect your frost-free date on that. So he's asking about timing of planting. How early can I get it in the ground? And at this point, we're saying respect your frost-free date, which is it around April 15th for here, or a little earlier than that? April 15th. So respect that frost date, for sure.
That was crabgrass. That was the question was on crabgrass.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen, I think we learned last year on some places the crabgrass can be kind of slow. So I think I figured out moving earlier than that with some success. We do want to be careful of that, but at the same time, we need to get it out. If we're expecting a crop out of it this year, we need to get it out pretty quick and understand that it takes time. You're developing a long-term forage solution, and it takes time to grow that crabgrass and get that stand to be productive in the seeding year. So give it some time and wait on it. And in the meantime, you've got to make sure you've done a good job with pre-plant weed control. It doesn't like competition during that establishment.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen you guys go in March and do very well.
Mm-hmm.
Little seed dormancy there built in.
Right.
Kind of insurance.
Mm-hmm. Tim?
The bulk of it comes around 50 degrees, so you want to get it in before the 50 degrees, but not have the bulk of it go too early that you get frost. So
Right.
See things at a very valuable point.
Right, so here we are, and it's, February 14th, and we've had 3 days of 60-degree weather, and there's no telling what's going to happen between now and April 15th. Yeah. So we're doing some experimenting to figure out, if that vernalization, if putting it out earlier is going to indeed get us some better stands, but for now I'd probably say err on the side of caution and stick with your frost-free date. For sure. So somebody wanted me to talk briefly about teff, and before I get on a rant about it, do any of you guys have horses or sell hay to horse people? Okay, good. So have you heard of teff? Have you heard the hype about it? Yes and no? The hype about teff. All these horse people are very excited about it. So teff is another warm season annual. I joke and call it like the forgotten grass. It's a pretty unimproved type grass. It's very difficult to get established. You've got to go into a tilled seed bed that you then cultipack. You want to cultipack it to be very firm. You don't want your boot to sink any deeper than a quarter of an inch. You'll go across, broadcast this very small seed, go back and cultipack it again, and then pray for rain, right? The reason that horse folks are so interested in it is because it's very low in non-structural carbohydrates. So let's think about donuts and oatmeal for a second here. Do we have any diabetics? Maybe? All right, so what's going to spike?
You can't just ask the crowd.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry. Sir, if you're uncomfortable, I understand. Okay, so let's think about blood sugar for a second. If you eat a donut, versus eating oatmeal, what's going to spike your blood sugar more? The donut, right? Okay, so some of our horses have the same issue where that spike in blood sugar causes a lot of health issues for them, and teff is the oatmeal, right? So it's very low in those immediately digested carbohydrates that can cause issues with our horses. So that's why there's such a big interest in it. It does make beautiful hay. It can be grazed, but you can't graze it until after the first hay cutting. Reason being, the roots don't develop very quickly, so if you let them in there to graze the first time, they just pull it right up. Yeah, horses can do that really well, right? Excellent. Thank you for the question about teff. Any other comments about summer annual grasses? This has been great. I'm excited, you guys. I hope you are. 2018 is going to be your year, for sure. All right, so I'll finish up here real quick. I can't leave without talking about adding in some more exciting broadleaf crops. And why in the world do we care about broadleaf crops? Typically, they're going to help us increase the plane of nutrition. They're usually more digestible or can bring some protein to the table. Again, for soil health purposes and kind of as a safety net, we really like having diversity in our pastures. Legumes can actually create nitrogen. And then our brassicas or our forbs do a great job of mining existing nutrients that are very deep down in the soil profile and kind of bringing them back to life. And it does help us enhance the growth curve. Again, just thinking about how these all grow relative to each other. So I've listed off a couple options here, and I'll just name off a few of my favorite. Clovers are always a good option. If in doubt, add clovers, okay? Especially if you're struggling with the endophyte or the fungus. In Kentucky 31, adding clover is going to be your quickest, easiest solution to kind of dilute some of those effects, okay? Chicory and plantain are some really fun forbs. I've really enjoyed working with those. They do a great job of pulling up minerals and can really enrich the diet of your livestock. For our cool season annual options, thinking about brassicas, your radishes, your turnips, this here is barcant turnip. I mean, imagine running your livestock through that. One thing you've got to be careful about with your brassicas is they're very high in protein and they're also really digestible. Thinking about that rocket fuel again, so you got to make sure you give them a little bit of fiber, otherwise they could go the wrong direction. Any of your annual clovers, crimson, arrowleaf does especially well in our sandier soils. So if you've ever tried to grow crimson before and it wasn't a huge success for you, think about trying arrowleaf. Moving on, some of our warm season annual options were a little bit more limited here, but cowpeas and sun hemp have been excellent summer annual legumes for us, and you actually can still plant brassicas during the summer. So wrapping up, if we're thinking about what you can do to balance your forage production, think about creating a forage plan. Sit down, write down all the months of the year, and list out when your forages come into season for you. Identify the holes in your grazing. Where are you lacking forage the most? And what can you put in that place to kind of fill that in for you? This is just an example that I put together for you to reference later. And I'm here to tell you right now, the perfect forage production plan is going to be different on every farm, and it's going to be different every year. And I'm sorry, I wish I had an easier answer for you, but this is the fun in farming, right? Is getting to try. He says, no, this is not fun. I think it's fun. Figuring out what works best in your system, thinking about your goals and how to get there, right? So again, identify where you lack grazing the most, add diversity across the farm and within each pasture, keep some acreage and animals to complement your perennial production and get that quality up. And also don't forget the most critical piece of this puzzle, which is your grazing management. You can put a ton of money into seed, a ton of money into fertility, but if you aren't willing to manage your grazing, you're never going to get anywhere, okay? Respect the grazing heights for your plants. So make sure that you're not taking your grasses too low, and make sure that you're giving them ample rest time, okay? Thinking about timely fertilization and grazing. Remember, it's all about competition. This is a cute little cartoon I stole from a turf grass company, but I think they've got it spot on. If we're grazing very close, not thinking about giving our plants ample rest time, then we're giving the weeds an easy competition, right? If we're respecting our grazing heights, giving good rest periods, our weeds are not going to have a chance. Okay, there's a producer that lives up near Asheville, North Carolina. He did a presentation a few weeks ago about his transition from continuous grazing to rotational grazing with very intentional grazing plan. And he said, don't let your pastures look like the Jenny Craig diet. Okay, and I think that's very important, very good advice for all of us. So with that, happy to take any questions you've got. Yes, sir. So the question was about ryegrass and the grazing height. With ryegrass, I like to let it get 6 or 8 inches tall before I start grazing it, and then I'd like to leave behind 2.5 inches. Now, my exception to that would be when you're ready for it to come off, like in late May, and you're overseeding Bermuda grass, right? You take it for hay. Okay, good. So whenever I was ready for it to come off in that last cutting, I'd probably be a little bit more aggressive with it just to help myself out a little bit. But otherwise, if you're wanting to get some regrowth out of it, leave behind 2.5 inches.
What about growing that teff? What kind of soil is it like? A sandy soil?
I'm sorry, what did you
The
say?
teff?
The teff. So soil preference for teff. I have seen it more so in clay type soils. Has anyone seen teff in sandier soils?
Well, I mean, you know, given where it comes from and the nature of the crop, you know, well-drained soil, sandy soil, and it's going to be fine. But the toughest thing, of course, is just getting it established. Can't reiterate that enough. But it's very drought tolerant. If you get a stand of it, it'll produce and it'll do very well. As far as soil preference, it's fairly widely adapted.
I would say that is probably, after established, it can go through more harsh weather, wet or extreme dry, than most of the others. But it is, you've got to have firm seed beds to get them started.
And you do need to harvest it before it goes to seed. It really drops quality crazy once it seeds out.
And it doesn't regrow after it goes to head grade. It's kind of like a small grain. It is a small grain.
Very strong.
Yeah. It's like tobacco seed.
That's the same thing.
Anybody who's growing teff? Is probably in the audience growing teff, or anybody growing it?
I did last year.
Okay. Good, bad, ugly, indifferent?
Came up really nicely. This was a couple of transitional fields, so you know, grazing wasn't an option. I was just doing it for hay and getting rid of the stuff that was there. It came on, grew really well. One patch had Johnson grass that I then ended up, you know, trying to figure out how to get that out of it. But it got a little more mature than I wanted because of weather patterns at the time. So it went about a week longer than I wanted to graze it. It takes forever to dry when you make it as a hay crop. It takes at least a day longer than any other grass. Even it'll feel dry, but
What are those other grasses you're saying? Like any other, like cool season grass?
I think it's I mean, at that point, I think I was right about then. This was like the middle of July, and I got some Bermuda grass, some Tiffin 85, and I think at that point it took 3 days to dry and it took 5 to get the teff dry.
It's a waxy leaf like in the ryegrass. It's very waxy, and that's why it's a drought tolerant. So it is slow to dry. I told people to have at least